And now I'll give the floor on a completely different topic, but very important nevertheless, to the Minister of National Education, so that he can explain the conditions that will govern the reopening of schools in France. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. As we've said over the last few weeks, reopening schools is a social urgency. It's an educational imperative as well. School, of course, is important for all children, and it's maybe even more important during a period of crisis. We'd like to thank all the personnel of the Education Ministry, as well as all the local representatives who have worked to reopen schools since the 11th of May, including middle schools for green departments. We have always wanted to guarantee the security of our personnel and students, and that's why we've set up a very rigorous health protocol. We've set it up in order to have guarantees, health guarantees for all students and adults, in order to reassure the whole of the country and guarantee a return to school, as was wished by the Prime Minister and the President. We are trying to be pragmatic and keep a collective spirit. We've worked with local representatives, elected representatives who've worked hard to reopen schools. We've also worked with staff. We have made sure that the most vulnerable people can continue working from home. We've also worked with the families by sharing information, by offering remote teaching. And of course, the situation in May was a transitional situation that, of course, was imperfect, but it did allow us to make gradual improvements. After this beginning in May, we are going to speed things up in June. And so, we will speed things up, all the while respecting our health protocols and keeping in mind what we're preparing for September. Regarding schools, I'd like to give you a stock-taking of the first phase that we've been undergoing since the 11th of May. If you look at the map, you can see that more than 80% of primary schools have been opened, and this number is growing day by day. More than 90% of communes have decided to open schools, and we're working with the 10 remaining communes in order to reach our objective of 100% by next week. There's a slight difference between departments in the red zone and in green zones. That is, of course, normal. In the department of Finistère, 100% of schools are open now. In the Loise department, which was particularly affected by the epidemic, 58% of schools are open, and this number is growing day by day. You can also see the proportion of students in primary school. There is still a big difference between green departments and red zone departments. In some departments, few children have gone back to school. In others, more than half of students are back in class. But you can see that this proportion is rising in all departments. 20% of students does not reflect the fact that more students have returned to school, because, of course, there are rotations. For example, in Bordeaux, around 60% of students have gone back to school since the 11th of May. In reality, we also have to go looking for the students who need school the most. It's our priority. It's a social and educational priority. This is the work of our teachers, but it's also something to do with all our partners in order to find these students, to identify those who need school the most. In the second phase, the phase that will start on June 2nd, all schools will be open. The last communes that still haven't reopened their schools will open them. All families who wish to will be able to send their children to school, at least for part of the week. As the health protocols are still in place, with the various constraints that we all know, class size will be limited to 15 students, but it is indispensable to have a extra support for families. And that's why we're developing a sport, civil-mindedness, health program, which will support cultural and civic education and health education. So this is something that we've set up with the local authorities, with state financing. And we hope to roll this plan out during June. So students can be in class in small groups, or they can take part in these activities, especially when parents are obliged to go to work. But this is something that is being rolled out progressively, gradually. Not everything will be ready overnight, but the important thing is to go forward. Now, speaking about middle schools, about collège, In phase one, we opened over a week ago the middle schools in green areas. There were 95.5% of these middle schools were opened. I'd like to thank teachers, local representatives who have managed to make this a success. We have data on the proportion of students going to middle school. Only 6e and 5e students went back to middle school in green zones. It's 28% of students went back, but this is a good starting point for a greater reopening, which I'll now announce. So in the second phase, what will happen in middle schools starting on the 2nd of June? All middle schools will open. All collèges will reopen, be it in green or in orange areas. In green areas, this means that 4e and 3e classes will reopen as well. So all collège classes will be open. And in orange areas, we will first welcome the students of 6e and 5e. And if the conditions are met, then the 4e and 3e students will also be welcomed. We will study the situation case by case. We have to be very flexible, seeing what is the situation on the ground is. The health protocol is maintained, of course, in middle schools, and so there will be system set up, and there's also the sport, health, and civic-mindedness program that will apply to the collège as well. Before talking about high schools, I'd like to mention going back to school for children with disabilities. They are one of our main priorities. We work with Sophie Cluzel, who's responsible for this point, and 80% of the ULIS, the special units for children with disabilities, can be welcomed in schools and middle schools. We have seen important progress, but we can go further. And this, our disabled students are at the heart of our concerns. We hope that 100% of schools for children with special needs will be opened by the end of next week. When it comes to high schools, our first priority is vocational schools, high schools, because there is a higher dropout rate in vocational schools, and because there are special needs at present there. From the 2nd of June, all high schools will open with the same health protocol that will be applied to middle schools. In green zones, this means that technological, general, and vocational schools will reopen and will gradually welcome students, at least on one of the various levels. Different levels will then be open depending on local situations. We are, once again, being very flexible, trusting the directors of the different schools and the teams on the ground with work that was started at the regional level. In the orange zone, we are, of course, being more cautious. Vocational schools will also reopen, but they will give a priority to students who need professional certification, meaning final year students and CAP students. In general and technological schools, students will be interviewed to work in small groups. And the goal by the end of the year for students in general and technological schools in orange zones is that they be able to have interviews to define their future plans with their guidance counselors. Lastly, the French exam. From the beginning of this crisis, we always took three factors into account: the health safety of our personnel and students, the equality of different students, and also to maintain the standards of our exams. So these criteria have helped us organize our baccalaureate exams, and these same criteria have pushed us to take a decision for the French oral exam for the baccalaureate. And I said we'd make this decision at the end of this week. We took the time that was necessary because we were attached to the fact that the students could work on these texts that are so important. The oral exam is very important for professional and personal success, and it's at the heart of the baccalaureate. And literature is an extremely important subject for our students. We have to make sure that our testing standards are guaranteed. I consulted with parents parents' associations, with educational authorities. I'd like to thank the students, the high school students and their representatives who were very active. I heard their worries. We heard the argument saying that the most just evaluation would be to take into account the grades of the first 2 trimesters of the year. And so the oral test will be validated by the grades received by the students throughout the school year, by the work that the students have accomplished through the year. I'll be very attentive to the future work of this year's students to make sure that they can prepare the rest of their final exams next year. I will keep a close eye on their progress. Thank you very much, Minister of Education.